Hello and welcome to another edition of the Door 14 Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Marty alongside John.
Hey, I'm back.
You've made your triumphant return. Hello, how you doing?
I have. I'm back. I'm feeling myself again. I am not having to do daddy daycare or daddy night care as it was the last time. So yeah, I'm back. But clearly, as everyone can see, Dave is not here.
Yeah.
Neither is Aaron, so clearly
No.
I was aware that I was feuding with Dave, but I was not aware that there was an issue with Aaron, so it's clearly I did something at the Challenge Cup final that he didn't really approve of.
Did the feud restart after the Challenge Cup final? Is that why the other two have disappeared off for tonight's recording?
I don't I mean, I'll be honest, I don't remember throwing up in his car, but I might have.
Yeah, we obviously put the feud thing to bed because obviously you and Dave were seen together at the Challenge Cup final, like in person.
You can be seen together. You can be seen together and still not be agreeing and feuding. Let's be clear about that. Just because he stayed in my house doesn't mean I like the guy.
If I took it out of context, that would sound quite bad, actually.
That's going to be my new ringtone.
Yeah, just clip it there. John, it has been a while, but it's good to see you back on the podcast. As I say, there is only me and you tonight, but we do have a lot to kind of catch up on in terms of we will get to the challenge.
I'm not saying I'm a glory hunter, but I'm here for one reason and one reason alone, and that's to talk about the Challenge Cup.
We will get there in period one, but I suppose we should explain we're a week behind our recording. We're normally we're now officially a week behind on our recording schedule. We pushed it back to this week because last week we were slightly fragile the next day. I know some people were slightly worse than others.
To be fair, I wasn't just as fragile because I'll be honest, the last pint that one of Dave's work colleagues got us, I got about 2 sips into that and I very quietly walked away to the bar and left it there. So I was not for finishing that. Being 36 is not middle-aged, or at least I hope it's not middle-aged, but being that sort of 36-year-old dad, life's tiring, and 5 pints is enough, let's be totally honest. Playoffs has me worried.
Yep.
Yeah, I already have the fear.
I'm the same, exactly the same. It was the same with me that night. If I ever kind of wanted to feel like I was getting old, it was definitely that night whenever the drink was flowing, and I did exactly the same as you, where I kind of subtly just like set it down on the table behind us.
Yep.
And I just thought to myself, playoffs. Oh man, I'm scared.
See the best thing that can happen at playoffs. Can we find a bar that has Guinness Zero?
Could do, or just a nice coffee shop instead.
I like your thinking. Your thinking.
But as it has been over 3 weeks since our last recording, there has been some changes in the when we say some changes in the league, it maybe not too many changes in the actual shape of where teams are sitting in the league, but certainly we are now in about with 4 weeks maybe left now to go. It's 4 weeks left to go in the season. We have 4 weekends left, and we have some major games coming up, and we have a really tight run at the moment at the top of the table in terms of in terms of the standings. So, John, if it's okay, we'll get stuck into the standings and have a quick look, and we'll get your thoughts. So, in the Viaplay Elite League, we're going to start with and looking at the standings there. Sitting in first place is the Belfast Giants with 46 games played and 71 points. Followed in second by the Guildford Flames, 45 games played, 68 points. And Cardiff Devils are in third with 46 games played, 68 points as well. The Sheffield Steelers currently sit in fourth with 45 games played, 66 points. Coventry Blaze are in fifth with 45 games played, 58 points. The Nottingham Panthers are in sixth with 44 games played, 40 points. But Manchester are right on their heels with 46 games played and 40 points. Glasgow Clown, which is interesting, went from having the least amount of played games in the league at the start of the season to now having the most games played at this point with 50 games played and 33 points. The Fife Flyers then sit in ninth with 47 games played, 30 points, and Dundee holding up the table, 44 games played, 25 points. Let's look at the bottom. No, let's look at the top. Let's start with the top. Let's look at the bottom in a minute. Let's start with the top. So, John, I mean, we've talked about it. We said it there already. 4 weeks left of this season. We have Belfast, Guildford, and the Cardiff Devils. I suppose we can't write off Sheffield yet because obviously they're sitting there. With
no. Let's write them off. Come on, let's be Belfast Giants fans here. Let's write off the Sheffield Steelers. No, it's not going to happen for them.
I don't see Sheffield Steelers doing anything further. I
Yeah,
don't.
they're in a fight. They're in a fight for third. They're in a fight for third.
The Belfast Giants play the Sheffield Steelers this coming Saturday. That'll be an interesting one. That's all I'll say.
Yep.
That is in Sheffield. Guildford Flames have took a bit of a knock over the last couple of games. Although what I will say is Coventry Blaze defeated the Belfast Giants this past Sunday. It was a double header this past Sunday in Belfast. Belfast took one game on the Saturday, and the Sunday game, the Coventry Blaze came back and won the second game, taking the 2 points in the second game. To which I think a lot of us then the response was, that's not kind of what we were hoping for, especially coming into this last run of things. But then Coventry Blaze also beat the Guildford Flames last night, which was the 8th, March the 8th, which is Wednesday. And they did beat them last night as well. So I mean, Coventry kind of doing us a favour as well. They're taking points off Guildford. John, I suppose let's look at it. Tough running for all teams, but I think when you look at the run-in for the games and the remainder part of the season, the Belfast Giants do have a bit of a tougher run. We have the Sheffield Steelers this coming weekend, and then we also have the Cardiff Devils double-header in Belfast the following weekend, or not the following weekend, the following weekend, the 18th and 19th, so the St. Patrick's Day weekend as they're calling it. I mean, the whole talk at the moment among the fan base, I don't know if you agree, will be that is it a possibility that we're looking at the final home game in Belfast is the Belfast Giants versus the Guildford Flames? Could we see the league coming down to that final weekend?
I honestly, I've been looking at this table pretty much since I was over and I was at the Sunday game against Coventry, which was a defeat. I cannot take my eyes off the run-in for these two teams. Like you say, the Belfast Giants sitting with a run-in that includes 2 games against Sheffield, 2 games against Cardiff, 2 games against Manchester, and then Guildford and Dundee in the final weekend. The biggest problem we've got is Sheffield are going to put themselves in a position of being league ruiners. So if they can go out and take those 2 wins, they're going to see it as having effectively crowned Guildford. Cardiff are going to be in exactly the same position. They're going to be. They know fine rightly that the title is more than likely out of reach for them unless Guildford and Belfast have a complete collapse over their last 8-9 games, depending on which team you are. The one that I would not take my eyes off is the fact that we have 2 games against Manchester. Manchester humiliated the Giants over a double-header weekend. So to think that there's any easy games in this run-in is just nonsense. Now, I am planning at this point, if things go well, to go to the last league game of the season, which is going to be over here in Dundee. I very much hope that the league is tied up by then, but I would be very happy to be in the minority if it came down to that final date. We've seen these games, these leagues come down to not even the last game, to sitting in a hotel after you've played all your games and watching other teams play. Now, it won't come to that because I think all the teams are playing their final games on that final Sunday.
Correct.
So I would expect and I would hope that things are going to be wrapped up. But do you know what? As much as I wish that we potentially had tied up the league by Christmas, there's nothing better than an exciting run-in. You look at and I know we're going to talk about it, the Challenge Cup final. It would have been nicer if that result was a little bit tighter. There's something about your enjoyment level, your heart rate going up in a run-in or in a tight game like that. So, I mean, my eyes are fixed for this run-in, and I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, I hope it comes down to that last weekend.
And I mean, no matter what happens, towards the end of the season, the one thing I will say is, and we talked about this right from the start of the season, right from as early as probably October time, I would say probably as the earliest point, where we talked about the fact that it's refreshing to see the likes of Guildford Flames sitting where they are and staying where they have been all season long. Yep. And showing that they're not just one of those teams that we're holding up or adding to the numbers in the league, which is what people used to kind of think of Guildford Flames. And That's not what's happened this year. That Guildford have fought, and you know what? It's great. It's exciting. And all I'll say, John, is if it comes down to that final game in Dundee, don't be surprised if I say, have you got a sofa for the night? Because I will
Oh, don't
potentially
worry.
come over.
There's about 5 different beds that you could probably sleep in that night.
Oh,
So
great! So
I'll
I'll have
not
a
put you
sofa.
on the sofa. I'll not put
Great.
you on the sofa.
Perfect. Let's just have a quick look just at the bottom end of that league. Just while we're just looking. Obviously we have 5 teams who have clinched playoff spots already. But it's the playoff spots, the last couple of playoff spots, the last 3 playoff spots are still to be decided, the 6th, 7th and 8th places. And the reason why we say that is obviously well, we could probably say now, we'll say now Nottingham, Manchester obviously will kind of, you know, probably take 2 of those spots no matter what. It doesn't really matter which way they end in terms of what position 6 and 7, although Panthers currently in 6th and could move down to 7th, but it doesn't matter. I think both are kind of safe enough at the moment. Although they haven't got X's there, I'd say that's probably very unlikely that Fife and Dundee will take a point where they'll come up to that high, but you never know. But I think what we're looking at here is probably that 8th and 9th place, that Glasgow Clan versus the Fife Flyers kind of position. Obviously, as we say, the Glasgow Clan are sitting with 50 games played, 33 points, and Fife Flyers have 3 games in hand over that, having only played 47 games and 30 points. What is interesting is obviously the Dundee have only played 44 games, so they have 6 games under Glasgow and they're on 25 points. So that last spot is still quite tasty in terms of the fight for that final spot for the playoffs. What do you see it going for the Hot Scotland teams?
It's sad to see that it's pretty definite that only one of them makes it to playoffs, and it will be in that 8th spot, which means they will be playing the league champions going into a home away Challenge Cup quarter final. So, I mean, we talk about the way that things have gone. Look at the Challenge Cup. Nothing's a certainty in this game, but it's unlikely that a Scottish team will make it to the Final Four weekend at this point if you're looking at form. Glasgow are looking really precarious. Just interestingly, I'm having a look at their running. They only have 4 league games left. They've played 50 games. They've only got 4 left, and those games are Guildford, Fife, Nottingham, and Sheffield. Those are hard games because you've got 2 league contenders, your playoff competition, and the Nottingham Panthers, who, to be honest, are fighting for 6th place at this point, and as good a draw as they can expect going into playoffs. Those are not easy games. Those points against Fife, for example, are massive. It might as well be a 4-point game, because that could be a massive swing. There's only 3 points between them at this point. And when you consider that their game before they come up against Fife is going to be a game against a Guildford team who are desperate for every point that they can get as they chase the Giants for the league title. So it's a tough one. Fife have 3 games in hand over the Glasgow Clan.
Yep.
And that is going to be, I think, really interesting to see how that team responds. And again, I keep saying we should have talked about it at the very, very start. We should have talked about the Challenge Cup. But this is a team that are in recovery mode after the Challenge Cup. They really, unfortunately, did not show up to a final that they tried really, really hard to get to. But they have an interesting run in as well. They've got Nottingham, Coventry, Manchester, obviously Glasgow, Cardiff, Dundee and Guildford. So they have games against opposition who have things to play for.
Yeah.
Nottingham, again, they're fighting for that position. Coventry, really, they're just fighting to be kingmakers at this point. Potentially. That's the biggest thing about Coventry. But Manchester, they're in that fight with Nottingham for position at this point. And again, Cardiff and Guildford, there's two big teams who are scrapping for points. But again, Fife are in a position where they've got potentially 6 points to win, to leapfrog Glasgow and put them down into 9th and put themselves into 8th. It'll be really interesting. Again, the top of the league, super interesting, super enthusiastic about the way that it's going because it's so tight. Bottom of the table, you absolutely love to see a run for that final playoff position. It's great, and it makes for massively entertaining games for the final 4 weekends.
Yeah, and also, you know, it still gives that there's still interest there still happening for the fans of those teams as well. It's not it's not the end of the season. There's still games there to be played that are meaningful games, especially for the teams sitting at the bottom. There's still very key games, and it still makes things interesting. So, yeah, interesting. Next time we record, will be 2 weeks left of the season, I think, by that point.
Be in Twitchy's Victor mode.
It will be. It will be, very much so. Very much so. John, I'm going to move us across the water to the NHL before we move into our period one. And just take a quick look just at the standings in the NHL. Starting with the Eastern Conference and Metropolitan Division, Carolina sit top with 62 games played at 92 points. New Jersey Devils sit in second with 63 games played at 88 points. And the New York Rangers are in third with 63 games played at 79 points. In the Atlantic Division, then, it stays the same. Boston are in top with 62 games played, 103 points. Toronto are in second with 64 games played, 86 points. And Tampa are in third with 64 games played and 81 points. The wild card spots are currently held by New York and Islanders and Pittsburgh Penguins. Ireland's not here, so we'll just mention Philadelphia are in 8th place there. Moving on to the Western side, and we're looking at the Central Division. Dallas are sitting top with 64 games played, 81 points. Minnesota are in second, 65 games played, 81 points. And Colorado are in third place there with 62 games played, 76 points. In the Pacific Division then, Vegas sit top with 64 games played, 82 points. Los Angeles have moved into second with 65 games played, 82 points. And Seattle moved down into third with 64 games played and 80 points. Wildcard spots currently held by Edmonton and Winnipeg. Although what would be noted is... what should be noted is, again, like talk about this every season, the places there after that, Calgary and Nashville are still within contention. They're quite close in relation to the points for those positions in wildcard. Nashville have only played 61 games compared to the 65 games, sitting on 69 points. So there is still a possibility to leapfrog into at least the second place spot there for the wildcard spots, which I'm sure, John, you're hoping for too.
I don't know, I'm in two minds. Like, obviously I love seeing the Preds make playoffs, but even if we do make playoffs, this will not be our year. We are a franchise that is in essentially a soft rebuild. David Poile is leaving the team, the only GM that we've had since the team's inception. And side note, the league's most winningest GM in history. He's won more games as a GM than any other GM in history. But with Barry Trotz coming in, the most successful coach in Predators history, coming in to be the new GM, who, as it turned out, I hadn't even realised this, that when he retired, he just lives in Nashville. Like, he just never moved away. He loves the place so much that he just stayed there. So I don't know whether this was long game by the organisation saying, right, David's going to go eventually, Barry, stick around, you're coming in, we want you to run the team. I'm really excited to see what he can do as GM, because his hockey credentials are probably second only to the likes of David Poile, but he's got a winning set of credentials as well, so I'd love to see what he's going to do with the organisation going forward. That's my take on Nashville. Can I take you back over to the East and discuss one thing, because I noticed it's not in our running order, and I want to point this out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Boston. And I know as a Leafs fan you don't like to talk about Boston, but let's talk about the Boston Bruins. Fastest NHL franchise in the league's 103-year history to hit 100 points. Yep. That's a dangerous team this season.
There's no argument there. They're a team who, from day one of this season, they have been looking just a class above everyone else. Just sheer dominance this season, and it shows. That statistic that you just said there. I mean, it's a clear indication of how they play this season. It has been.
But just look at the point spread. Look at the point spread when you go to the league standings, the league overall standings. 62 games played for 103 points. The next team, Carolina Hurricanes, have played the same number of games, 62 games, but are 11 points behind. Yeah. That's it. With the vast majority of the league having actually played more games.
Look at the differential.
Yeah. It's insane.
It's
a differential
insane.
of plus 105.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a team scoring goals for fun. That's insane.
it's crazy, absolutely insane. And even if you look at,
Does anyone stop them on a run to the cup? I know that playoffs is a different ballgame. I mean, look at this jersey hanging here, like President's Trophy winners, and then got absolutely bombed out. Winning the league, winning the President's Trophy doesn't get you anything. It doesn't guarantee anything when you go through. But that sort of form is insane.
Yep.
I mean, if you're any of the teams in the wildcard spots and you're looking at this point of potentially hitting Boston in the first round, I'd be inclined to throw in the towel.
I mean, we're going to be coming back to the playoffs because one of the big things we're going to talk about in our second period, we are going to cover obviously the trade day and trade deadline day, I should say, which took place last week, and it's quite a significant shipping around of different players and kind of seeing where some of those teams are kind of moving and some of the kind of moving and shaking they've done, and some big names moving, some surprise names moved as well, which we'll get into as well. We'll look at the fact that the Bruins have made a kind of what I think has been a phenomenal signing to strengthen their team moving into the playoff spot, and I kind of thought to myself, well, they're already quite strong as it is. Why, now that they've made these moves, 3 moves in total I think they made, that which just make them even seem even more dominant and more scary. And it's just like, to say that, having seen where they already are at this point of the season, it's as you say, John, like when you come to think about the playoffs, I know as you say it's a different ball game when it comes to playoffs, but it's just
the way that they've been playing. It's going to take something massive, and do you know what? See, if that massive thing was the Leafs beating them in the first round, I would take it. This is, if you're going to do it any year, this is the year to do it.
They won't see each other in the first round, though. They won't see each other. I think
I think Toronto should organise it. I think you should start bombing games. Just lean into the history, Marty. Like, just get yourselves, organise it, get yourself into that position, start losing games. But you go with the mentality. We want Boston in the first round. We either take them out or they go for the run for the cup. Let's just take them in the first round.
I think I did read it. I think I was reading there yesterday about that if the league ends kind of currently as it is sitting right now, which kind of looks like it might happen that way. Toronto would
the Cardiff Devils win the cup because they can go toe to toe with any NHL franchise.
Clearly. I think it'd be the third round before they would potentially see each other if they both get to that stage. So I think that was what they said.
I'm serious. The Leafs need to start bombing games, drop down, and take the Bruins in the first round. That's your only hope of winning the Stanley Cup this season.
No, we know that's never going to happen in the Stanley Cup. We never come get Boston in the playoffs. That's always a bad recipe.
It's not. It's not. Lean into it.
We will come back to the NHL in our second period, and we will start talking about that playoff running, because again, playoffs are coming up on us quite quick as well in the NHL. That'll start in April time as well, so we will get back to that. But John, what we'll do is we'll get stuck into our period 1 of hockey and get stuck into our main news items. Okay, period 1 is a roundup of news stories from around the UK. We're going to start off, obviously, with the story we've been wanting to talk about from our intro and from the start, and we'll talk about it. We have to talk about it, obviously, now, which is exciting for us because we want to talk about it. That's obviously, of course, the Challenge Cup, the Viaplay Challenge Cup has been decided for 2023, having the Belfast Giants taken the win 9-3 over the Fife Flyers in what was a sold-out, jam-packed SSE arena. Where should we go with it first? Let's start with the first thing, the first obvious thing, and that's the scoreline. John, let's start with that first. We'll go with that. After the game was done and dusted, the game was completed. A lot of smattering. Is that the word? Is that what I'm trying to find? A lot of
smattering.
Sprinkling, I don't know. There's a lot of fans on social media anyway.
Bit of sprinkling,
just whatever it was. A lot of fans on social media from other teams, shall we say, across the league, saying that it was a farce. The fact that it was a Challenge Cup, it was a final that got to a scoreline of that nature. Some people are saying, is it just some teams' fans just being a bit bitter that they weren't there? Some other people saying, actually, you have a fair point that it should have probably been a closer game.
You know what? Who cares? There were 10 teams who went into the Challenge Cup this year. 2 of them made it to the final on merit, on goals scored, on games won. Those were the Belfast Giants and the Fife Flyers. If you're a fan of any other team and you're complaining about the result of a cup final where your team wasn't, maybe have a look closer to home and figure out why your team wasn't in that final. And if you are in Sheffield in particular, you need to ask very, very strong questions about why your team wasn't in that final. Because you went in pole position and you had every opportunity. At the point now where I'm sick of hearing from Sheffield fans about the logistical impossibilities of getting to Belfast on a Wednesday. Do you know what? It clearly wasn't logistically impossible because plenty of you had your hotels and your flights booked prior to you even booking your place in the final. And in fact, there were a few of you in the arena as well, so it was clearly logistically possible, which I proved myself by coming from Fife over, and so did over 700 Fife fans. So do you know what? The Fife Flyers earned their spot in that final. Yes, it was a tough result for them, but 700 odd fans, the entire squad, earned their place in that final. And they were there, they were loud, and I hope they enjoyed it as well because it was a cracking night, especially if you're a Belfast Giants fan. 4 out of the last 5 Challenge Cups.
Yep, and I echo exactly what you say. A lot of chat was going around about obviously the scoreline, about Fife being there. We had people talking about it's always unfair every year. And listen, we're John's the first one that'll admit it. We talk about it, we joke around about it at the start of every season. John's favourite cup is the Challenge Cup because it takes so long to get to the point where we get to the final. The group stages take way too long. We've talked about how we can fix it we've been asked the question by people from listeners, how do we fix it going forward? We've put forward our ideas of how we fix it. We know it's not going to be fixed anytime soon, and we get it. We've seen people complaining about the Giants are always going to get home ice advantage because they'll always win their group stage. Fair enough, maybe we will, but there's been stages where there's been previous seasons where we've struggled in our group stage. Up until
the first time not the first time we won it, but back in, I want to say 2017, 2018, when we beat Cardiff in Ice Arena Wales, that was the start of this long run of success in the Challenge Cup. It was a cup that the Giants couldn't buy.
It was also but the thing is, and people will argue that, but it's different because at that point they didn't have home ice advantage because obviously it was being played in neutral, in inverted commas, a neutral venue. That first year against Cardiff Devils...
That's well enough if you're not a Cardiff Devils fan.
Yeah, that first year against Cardiff Devils, it wasn't a neutral venue. The second year, yes, we played against Guildford, and maybe that was a neutral venue because we played in Cardiff, and it was Belfast versus Guildford, and therefore you could say it was... But again...
Do you know what? The second final that Cardiff went to, the neutral venue, was Ice Arena Wales. They got beat at home again as well. So, yeah. Do you know what? The home ice advantage, yes, when you succeed and when you're the home team and you lift a cup, yes, you get to talk about home ice advantage. In Belfast's case, you get to talk about 6,000 Belfast Giants fans getting to watch the home team win the Challenge Cup. We've done it twice now in Belfast. Okay, we also did it twice in Ice Arena Wales.
Yep. Once
against the home team, who clearly had home ice advantage, and once against a team who were just slightly different colours than the home team in the Guildford Flames. So stop chatting about home ice advantage. The owners of your teams went into this competition and agreed it. And like you said, the Challenge Cup is a complete disaster of a competition. It shouldn't last as long as it does. It's a completely broken format. It's absolutely insane that we are 4 weeks to the end of the regular league season and we've only just finished it. It's a complete and utter disaster. Do you know what? Yeah. I'll take it. We just lifted a trophy. 9 other teams didn't. Shove it up, yous.
We'll finish. We'll move before we move on to next year. We'll talk about a couple of positive notes that came out of the Challenge Cup final because I feel like it's worth mentioning and worth shouting out to some people for just what was put on was actually a very great, it was a very good presentation of the whole thing. The one thing I will say is that the Giants organisation, who maybe coordinate it with the Elite League, although had home ice advantage because obviously it was being held in the SSE Arena, that entrance, opening and whole setup about the initial game part was first class. It made it feel like both teams had a fair advantage and were both being represented equally. Both having videos to start with, having the flames, the fireworks all starting at the very start of the game as both teams are coming out. All of that was the same for both teams. There was no advantage to the Belfast Giants like they normally would have on the home ice arena where they have the flames on their own. That all happened at the start. It was I felt personally that it was a great showing, and as you say, John, a big shout out has to go to the Fife Flyers OSC, the Fife Flyers supporters club or whatever they call themselves, because I mean they logistically got like busloads of fans to that arena.
I think it was about 770 Fife fans.
Phenomenal,
I mean,
phenomenal
to be honest,
showing.
When I was leaving Fife, someone just said to me, "Sure, will you turn the lights off on your way out?" Like Fife just emptied into Belfast.
Yeah, it was great.
I had to hang the keys like in Edinburgh so that the first person back could get in.
Oh yeah, okay. The Kingdom, yeah, have to open the gates.
Yeah. We locked the bridge.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's clearly. But the whole thing itself, I thought was it was a great showing. The presentation itself was fantastic, and
the entertainment value of sort of what was put on was absolutely fantastic. Like you say, the start was neutral. There was one video was put up on the screens in the arena, and I assume on the Viaplay broadcast as well. It highlighted both teams. It highlighted both teams' arenas, fans, mascots, all of that. There was no one lean one way or the other, regardless of where the competition was taking place. It was absolutely fantastic. It was. Do you know what I loved? I loved seeing the pyro back in that arena as well. Like I know why we stopped doing it a few seasons ago. Like we had maybe one full season where we did the pyro thing in the SSE. And I know why we stopped, because there were complaints about it, about consistently like bangs and flashes and everything. But just the value of seeing the team skate out to that, the trophy being there, the sparks going up, it was absolutely fantastic. And then even at the end, the presentation, the way that it was run, Mike Hicks being on the ice to present the trophy to David Goodwin, the celebration on ice. I've gone back and watched some of the highlights as well. The broadcast, the coverage from Viaplay, from Aaron Murphy and Sheds doing commentary, just absolutely fantastic, brilliant thing. I would have loved to see again the broadcast maybe being done in a more accessible manner. I know that loads of people have subscriptions to Viaplay, but it would still be really, really great to see that one of our highlight finals broadcast on free-to-air TV. I know that some people have their issues with sort of the old BBC broadcast that there used to be, the Sky broadcast. But to be fair, that was a subscription service as well. But it would still be nice to highlight that somewhere.
And
I don't know why. You look at the likes of Channel 4. It's a total aside now. I'm stepping away from the Challenge Cup, but you look at Channel 4 moving into things like Rugby League. Now, we're getting across the Elite League. We're getting crowds pretty comparable to Rugby League. So why are we not approaching the likes of them? Put it on Channel 4. Put TV timeouts in because Channel 4 has advert breaks. We're doing that already with Viaplay. And I get it. Viaplay people are going to come at me now about this. Viaplay sponsor the league. Of course they're going to put yeah, that's fine. That's great. Let them do that. But we want to grow the sport. So let's let people watch it without having to pay a fortune in subscriptions to a subscription service.
I think that's a great argument. I think that is a great argument. I know Viaplay, obviously, I'm sure they still have. I think is Free Sport still part of Viaplay's collection of.
They took Premier and Free Sport, so I'll be honest, I haven't looked at it.
I don't know, and I know
the Elite League games are never on Free Sports. They're always on.
They won't.
The paid version.
Yeah, they won't put them on Free Sport because they know people will want to pay to watch it, and they'll pay for subscription. And I get that, but again, as you say, having an option there where even like once or twice per year, where there's an option to kind of increase and build your audience for the Elite League and for ice hockey as general in the UK.
Well, maybe is that the argument? Is it the argument that the Challenge Cup final and maybe the playoff final, or maybe at least the playoff semi-finals, do they go on the free equivalent version?
I think
should they be on something that's free to air, and then you say, right, you suck them in and you go, right, okay, there's your semi-final. You know the you know the setup for the finals. Come on, come and pay to watch the final. Come and pay to watch the playoff final. Even show your 2-leg semi-finals in the Challenge Cup. If we don't fix this stupid format, put those on the free one, and then put your final on the pay. I'm not going back on myself. I said I want to see it on free to air TV, but there's got to be a way to do that. That Viaplay or any league sponsor, if they are a broadcaster, get to push their subscriptions. But the only way to push the subscriptions is to bring people in. And the best way to do that is to put it out there for free.
Before we move on to the next bit of the story, some people will argue, just sticking with the free-to-air thing, some old school Giants fans will argue that they don't want the whole BBC free to air thing for big finals, because I think the final against Ayr back in the day, I think was a bit of a jinx because it was on BBC, and I think the Giants completely I think they completely choked on that night.
People have talked about different things before. We complained about the black jerseys, we snapped that curse. So let's get it on free. Like, same way I said, like, the Leafs want the Bruins in the first round. You're going to snap this at some point. Put the Giants in a final on free-to-air TV, and we'll still win it as well.
Before we move on to a completely different subject and different story, I just want to stick with this one. It's a different story, but it's still sticking with the Challenge Cup. The Challenge Cup Friday. The Challenge Cup final did see the first time the Elite League decided to collect time on ice live in-play data. They're currently preparing upgrades to the Game Center and back-end statistic platforms for the 2023 and 2024 season. So they used the Challenge Cup as the tester for this new system. They will be doing it again for they'll be collecting the same ice data collection information for the playoff finals weekend for both semi-finals and also the final. And the idea will be that it'll just kind of give a broader picture and information data collection for the whole season in relation to players on ice times. It looks at plus minus numbers. It's got a lot more than what I'd ever had. John, have you had a chance to look at the document that they prepared for this out of this? So it was PDF at the bottom.
I've had a look, and I'm looking at it now, but I'm more interested to know how they did this. And I know that so Mike Hicks's press release about this, he basically says thanks to the Giant stats team for facilitating this. Is this data literally people logging this by hand into a database, or is there a technical format that's been used for this? Has there been player tracking? Is that how that's been done? Has it been done in a similar fashion to rugby, where they've got the sensor in their back? Or have they literally just collected live data by having a team of people sat in the arena going, and they're on, and they're off, and they're on, and they're off?
See, this is my question. I wanted to know the same. I was going to ask you exactly the same question of how you thought this was done, because I can't imagine them having like 12 people in, or like, it's not 12, 10 people in the stands, and clicking a stopwatch every single time, say Rupp gets on. Click the stopwatch, Rupp got on, right, Rupp's it off, stop that stopwatch. Okay, like Cullen's came on, quickly start the stopwatch,
Yeah.
I don't know how they've done it. So there has to be some form of technical, there has to be something.
Has to, because it's down to the second and everything. Interestingly, that let's leave that all to the side. I'm just looking at the stats that are on there. You see our face-off stats?
Yeah.
You've got Grant Cooper and David Joubert, 100% on the face-off dot.
Exactly. I know.
Insane.
Fantastic. It's crazy. Unbelievable statistics for that. Unbelievable. Whenever you look at when you take a look of when you look over at Fifes, I think their highest was 57, which was Chris Lawrence, their centre, was their highest percentage of the face-offs. So it's insane. But when you looked at the times as well, if you look at the times of people spent on ice, as well as that, like, I mean, you look at it and you have the top numbers in Belfast. You've got the likes of why is this not scrolling up? You've got the likes of who did I see notice had the top spot? Sam Rupp with the most minutes on ice, followed by Will Cullen. But when you look at it, it was 22 minutes for each of them on the ice. But if you switch over to Fife and you look at the top in Fife, I mean, you had Mikael Johansson there, 27 minutes and 17 seconds spent in total on ice. I mean, that's a crazy amount. That's
nearly half a game. That's this. Stats like this show you the difference in teams with and without depth in the squad. So Belfast Giants clearly able to spread their ice time across 2.5, nearly 3 full lines of forwards and defensemen. Whereas with Fife, they are clearly leaning incredibly heavy on their first line, with a little bit on their second and third lines, but nowhere near as much as they're leaning on their first lines. Interestingly, the other thing I'm noticing in this data that really annoys me is the goaltender data just isn't there. So for both teams, it shows that Tyler Beskorowany and Shane Owen spent no minutes on ice.
Yeah. And
I'll tell you the other thing that annoys me about this and the way that this has been presented. You see the team colours.
Oh my god! I was just about to say to you, you stole that from me. You're in my head. You stole that from me. I was just about to say, when did Belfast start playing in green?
Listen, there's a reason we don't play in green, and the league need to respect that. Damn it!
It's teal, goddammit, teal.
So,
but I thought that was
a word with themselves. It's really cool to see. And do you know what? The tech is there. There's even camera systems out there that can track the players. Like we talked about one of the systems on the podcast maybe last season, where there was I think there was a loan program in the NIHL, and they could be used for, I think, webcasts as well, where it did sort of puck tracking, so it could swing left and right. But it would just be interesting to know more about how the data is collected. Not just the fact that it's collected. The fact that it is fantastic, but it would be good to know how they're doing it in the same way that it would be good to know why some teams still don't have goal line technology.
The last thing I'll say before we move on is that they've got, if it is high tech technology and stuff, it's still good to see that the league can still have human error when it comes to publishing some of their information. If you look at the top right hand side of the actual document, it says Viaplay Elite League Season 2018-19 Group Final.
Hexy.
Something wrong there, but anyway, we'll move on to another story. John, we'll switch over to you for your story.
This was one that just popped up tonight, actually. So this was a press release that was put out by the Manchester Storm, who have come out this evening and said, following the recent rise in running costs, the club have been left with no alternative but to reluctantly increase ticket prices for the remaining home games of the 2022-23 Elite League season. Over the last few months, we've come under ever-growing price increases for day-to-day running of the organisation, and we've been working tirelessly to cover these costs but are left with no option but to increase ticket prices. This is predominantly down to the significant increase in energy prices for commercial organisations. We note that we should have communicated this to you, our fans, sooner and apologise for that. The club is nothing without our loyal fans, and we deeply appreciate your ongoing support as we continue to grow as an organisation. So clearly, they've hit some financial problems with having to maintain their ice plant and keep the place effectively frozen. But there's obviously been people who've noticed ticket price increases to get into Altrincham Arena or Altrincham Ice Rink. And the club have had to come out and make the statement. It's not a great look for a club, especially at this point in the season. You can totally accept them having to do it. I mean, everyone's in the same position. Energy costs for everyone, whether you're a commercial organisation or you're someone sitting at home, are enormous, bigger than they've ever been, and a lot of people are struggling. But you would think that an organisation who's reliant on tickets sold at the gate would maybe be more forthright with this, because I think fans could forgive you if you were forthright and upfront about it, but I think maybe you can burn some bridges if you try to be sneaky about it and just increase your ticket price. It's unfortunate, but it's, I don't know, it feels like something that wouldn't have happened under Omar Pasha in his day in that team. Who is now of a different parish up in Nottingham, or down in Nottingham, up in Nottingham.
Down?
I have no idea. My English geography is terrible.
Down.
Anyway, he's somewhere different in Englandshire. So yeah, interesting one, but quite a quite a hard one for the last few weeks of the regular season for Manchester to have to do.
I was about to say, I mean, obviously things have become to a point where they've obviously felt that they need the ticket increase need to happen now and not any later, which obviously it's fine. And as you say, like maybe the communication has been poor in relation to the fact that the cost has been went up, and they tried to do it without kind of consultation and without people letting people know, and people were kind of like, here, what's going on here? I think it does come as a surprise because it's unusual for a ticket price to rise mid-season. For any team, so it probably has come as quite a bit of a shock and a bit of a surprise if someone's gone along, paid for one game already, and then all of a sudden the next time around they go to pay for another game. It's like, oh, why is there an extra £2 on top of the ticket cost this time around compared to last time? And why does it happen mid-season? As I say, most teams will probably usually try to wait until the season comes to an end and then announce, unfortunately next season we'll have to raise our ticket prices, which I will say we'll probably see for maybe a few teams next year. Although season ticket prices are starting to come out, I've noticed for teams across the league, and they do seem quite competitive in terms of there doesn't seem to be too much of a change in relation to significant changes anyway in terms of costs. There's a pound here or there maybe, but nothing of significance in relation to kind of sticking their arm in or anything. Now, we haven't seen a certain team that plays in yellow yet what their season tickets are going to be, but Sheffield announced theirs this week, and I kind of thought, myself, fair play to Sheffield's as well. I kind of thought, they're actually half decent prices for, they're kind of stuck in around where they were last season too. So
I sometimes feel that the arena, I think the arena teams they maybe get a bit of a tough ride on that. That yes, they generally have fairly competitive pricing, but sometimes even small increases from those larger fan bases can get people's hackles up a little bit. Whereas the smaller teams, they don't have the capacity to spread their costs over just as many fans. So that's why you see, for example, I was just looking out of interest at what this new ticket price for Manchester is. So Manchester's game this weekend against Belfast Giants is £23 a ticket, which is pretty expensive.
Sorry, what?
I mean, it's probably not the most expensive that's out there, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is, but yeah, £23 a seat. That's you take two people going to the game, you've got probably not enough change out of £50 for a pint.
Nope, was not expecting it to be. I don't know why. I don't know what price I was expecting to be. I wasn't expecting to hear that price, but wow. Interesting.
So, there you go. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what season ticket prices do as we move forward in the off season, and depending on what the energy market does.
Yeah, exactly. We'll move on to our last story for this period, and it's just a quick one, because obviously a lot of these games have already passed, so we already know what this is. But it'd be remiss of us not to talk about it because it is one of our favorite subjects, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it since these were released, and images were put up. So as we know, the Retro Weekend, the Elite League held a retro games across the Elite League, mostly this past weekend, but also a few, one more being played tonight in Cardiff game is being played tonight, isn't that right? Cardiff and Manchester playing tonight, and it's the retro game in Cardiff tonight.
Morning. You say that the game is currently ongoing. Would you like to know the current score?
The game should be nearly finished, isn't it? But yes, tell me what the score is, John.
The current score at 45-47. So obviously we are very much into the third period now. Is the Cardiff Devils 1, the Manchester Storm 1?
Oh. But we'd be remiss of us not to talk about the I suppose the retro, the most important part of the retro thing was the fact that the majority of teams, I say majority of teams because I'm going to slam at least one team here. Majority of the teams went for a retro look for their jerseys for their retro games. We have some really nice throwbacks in relation to, we had like the Nottingham Panthers. Well, some people will like it, some people won't like it. They went back to one of their most famous jersey designs, and that's the yellow and white the white spiky lines. It looks a bit like Charlie Brown, but I like it. We have the looks of that. We have the likes of that. We had the likes of the Coventry, the Coventry Blaze, going back to that kind of cartoon dragon design with the flames at the bottom, which is a really nice like throwback as well. And then you go to the likes of the Belfast Giants, who, while it was an okay jersey, it was a nice jersey, there's nothing retro about that jersey in any way, shape or form. There's nothing that told you about the history of this team. There was nothing that told you about the sheer, like, nothing Nothing about that jersey told me it was retro. Absolutely nothing. But
Yeah.
that's my feelings, personal feelings on it. There's just nothing. We had, and when people say, "Oh, but what would you want?" I was like, "Well, two options you could have went for is a design of her jersey and use. We have another logo, an old school logo that we could have used, or alternatively go with a season. I've got a pile of old jerseys here. Go with a season 1, a season 3, a season 4 jersey, something that was loved by everyone, and stick the new Giants branding on that jersey, and you would have had an amazing jersey. You would have had a brilliant retro jersey anyway. And Retro Night itself, apart from maybe a throwback of just listen to my like my Spotify playlist from the 90s. Apart from that, they had I think the only thing I noticed was that they did on the screen in Belfast anyway. The only thing I can see was that the screen in Belfast had the font where it had like Belfast and it had the team. It looked exactly like the old. If anybody who used to go to the games who remembers the old scoreboard in the middle of the arena, it looked like the numbers and the lettering from that, and that's what was retro about it. Nothing really else. And I think they had a few bits and pieces of songs I haven't heard in a while being played for the first time in a while, but. Apart from that, John, let's get back to the main part, which is the jerseys. Is there any particular jersey? Obviously, the two jerseys that aren't on the Elite League website, but you have seen them, I'm sure, is the Sheffield one and obviously the Braehead clan. As Glasgow reverted back to Braehead for one night only. Any particular jersey for you? You kind of were like, I like that one more than others?
It absolutely pains me to say it, but Nottingham pulled a blinder because that is... I think for a lot of people, if you think about the Nottingham Panthers, that is the jersey. That's probably their most successful period as well. Is it a Super League jersey?
I would say it would be.
I was trying to remember if it was a Super League or a very early Elite League jersey.
No, it's a Super League.
Them. I think it's Super League.
Yeah.
Cardiff Devils as well. They've been the most interesting, I would say. It's not my favourite, but the most interesting because they did the colour flip and they went back to the old school white being the home colours.
Yeah.
Which, if we're talking about the lack of anything interesting in the retro jersey for the Belfast Giants, that's what I would have liked to see, is the return to a white home jersey. Especially when you consider that we're one of the few teams in the league who have different helmets and socks and everything depending on whether we're playing at home or whether we're playing away. So that was an opportunity for the team. Now, to be fair, I think actually when I saw the highlights, the team did actually wear the white lids for the home game. I
think they were brand new because they were the shiniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Well, you haven't seen them, that's the thing, because that's the away gear that they normally wear. But yeah, that I would have liked to have seen something like that. But I would probably say, yeah, Nottingham pulled an absolute blinder, brilliant jersey. Manchester, they've got an easy one because everyone still loves that old school hockey mask logo from the original Storm. So whenever they get something like this, a throwback jersey or whatever, they go back to that logo, and that's an instant win. It's a shame to see Dundee. I know that Dundee have never really had much in the way of... well, they've never really changed their jersey, but it's not as boring as the Belfast one, but it just looks like a normal season jersey. And the Flyers, massively uninspiring because all they did was recreate a jersey through public vote that was done on their social media for the most popular old school jersey. And I had a long chat with Dave, I think, about this. The Flyers are a storied team. They're the oldest team in the UK. They have some real proper old school, like even back to hockey sweaters. They could have done a design that could have been so good. And I know that look, whenever they brought out a tartan jersey a few years ago that kind of looks like the one that they brought out for the retro night, I went and grabbed it because I call it my Caesar jersey. If I run past somebody fast enough, if they're attacking me, then they might fall down having an epileptic fit. But it's just disappointing. I mean, overall, I think the league was quite disappointing. Even a couple of the teams calling them reverse retro. How dare they? Because you look at the NHL and how they've done the reverse retro. Some of them are absolutely amazing. So it's a retro night, and it's just an excuse for somebody to design a new jersey. I think there's really only two, maybe three teams who I think got it right, and that's Nottingham, Cardiff, and Manchester.
I wouldn't take Sheffield out of that because I think Sheffield's design was also inspiration. Like it was a great jersey. Again, I know you tripped around a bit, but it pains you to say it. But Sheffield, I should say, clap of hands for Sheffield's because Sheffield's jersey itself was so like it was proper 1990s retro with the old hockey glove holding the stick. Steelers logo. All it was missing from the front of that jersey was it Ewan's? I think it was Ewan's beer that sponsored them back in the day. McEwan's sponsored them back in the day. That was all it was missing from that jersey. Real retro, and I thought, you know what, Steelers got it right as well. I thought the Steelers and Nottingham Panthers done fantastic job with the jerseys. So massive congrats to them. Okay, that's enough for now for the league. We will come back to the league in our final segment, which is our overtime segment, because we do have a couple of questions in relation to the league that have been put forward to us from a number of people. So we will come back to it at the future. But John, what we'll do is we'll get moved over to our period 2 of hockey. We didn't actually discuss who's going to do period 2. So
no, we didn't. I was waiting to see what you were going to do. I was going to ask you, so it's the two of us, so who's actually doing this one?
I'll take it. Period 2 is a roundup of stories then from anywhere else across the world, primarily focusing mostly this time around on the NHL. A couple of big stories coming out of a couple of big things coming out of the NHL which to talk about, and we'll just get stuck into the first one. The first one, I guess, is a continuation of stories that have been a story that has been kind of dominating over this season, especially over this last 3 months in the league, in the NHL, and that is the story of. For anyone who doesn't know, in the NHL has a program in the NHL which is supposed to be around inclusion for all within the Elite League, within the NHL. I keep saying Elite League, in the NHL, and as part of that is the Hockey is for Everyone is the campaign. And as part of that, each year, you already know the story. Each year, each team will do a annual Pride night, and this year already we have seen a bit of controversy in New York, following basically the full team deciding in New York that there was not going to be a Pride night, in as much as they advertised Pride night with Pride jerseys and Pride tape, and it didn't take place. They still had a Pride night, but they didn't have any of the extra razzle dazzle jerseys, tape. They didn't do any of that as part of their night. They still celebrated a Pride night, which should be said, but they didn't do the extra little bits that they agreed they were going to do. This all came from obviously one player for the Philadelphia, who, for religious reasons, which was said at the time, Ivan Provorov made a decision to abandon the Pride jersey during the warm-up initiative, and decided not to do it. So it was kind of a follow-on. The New York Rangers then kind of also did the same. But the most recent team for it to happen with, and David isn't on tonight to have a chat about this, is the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild quietly deleted web pages, while also then not following through on advertised Pride night that they had said they were going to do. So the Minnesota Wild did have Pride jerseys, and we're supposed to wear Pride jerseys as part of the warm up, like every other team, and we're supposed to have as part of their Let's Play for All. And they decided at the end that nobody on the team would play in it. Also, as part of that, there was supposed to be an auction. As part of it, where all of the team jerseys then would be put up for auction on this auction site, and all that money would be going to a community organisation, LGBTQ plus organisation, would be a benefit of the money that was raised from the auction off of all of those jerseys. However, on the night, the website that had been initially advertised had been quietly removed and no longer up and running, but obviously because the jerseys were not going to be used, so they've had to remove their website. Again, I think what has mostly happened, or what has maybe kind of then thrown into the mix, is that I think the biggest question that is now coming out is, what does this mean, John, do you think, for the future of this campaign? You know, the Hockey is for Everyone campaign has been something that has been spearheaded by the NHL. It's something that has been tried to kind of, live through, and they've kind of tried to really push. But the fact that we've had 3 teams now pushing back against it, what do you feel that means for this more movement moving forward?
The biggest thing for me, with the fact that we're seeing multiple issues with Pride nights and Hockey is for Everyone nights is the abject silence from the league. There seem to be no repercussions. There seems to be no stance being taken, even though that these are supposed to be league-wide initiatives, which are supported locally by clubs who are supposed to be looking after the community within their own fan base. It's interesting looking at some of the social media around this in Minnesota, with different things seeing to be the reason why this was all pulled. Everything from they were protecting a Russian player from potential repercussions when he goes home, down to the entire locker room just flat refusing to wear the Pride jerseys on the night. Now, this was a Tuesday night game. We're currently recording on Thursday, which is Thursday daytime over in Minnesota at the minute. The team still hasn't made any substantive statement about what happened and why what happened. For me, if this continues on, there needs to be a league stance. We have even seen league stances taken in our own elite league, where certain teams that will remain nameless were called out for lack of actions during sort of Pride nights, or actions which didn't sit well with fans who would either be part of the community or would be allies to the community, where there seemed to be a little bit of cloak and dagger. And since then, the league itself, the Elite League, has taken ownership over things like Pride, with it now coming in, I think it's January, now late January, early February, tends to be Elite League Pride Week. So it's unusual that we're sitting here saying that the Elite League have got something right and the NHL have got something wrong, but there needs to be a step up from the NHL and to clarify what the league's position on Hockey is for Everyone and Pride nights is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things I was reading, and again, we don't know. We're not currently living in the climate in the states of what is kind of currently happening there. We know that at the moment there is quite a the LGBTQ plus community is having a real difficult time. In the states with obviously trans rights and trans movements and stuff really coming under fire in relation to kind of legal moves being made in different parts. And I know we should be saying we should be keeping politics out of the sport, and sport shouldn't be linking in with politics and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, when you've got a minority group who feel that they're being attacked from a government point of view in terms of like from state levels, from Senate level right up to quite high on the Hill in Washington, you've got things like that happening, and then you've got teams who as part of that not supporting or doing Pride. And I know it seems like a small thing that they didn't do it, but when you think about the current climate that's kind of going on at the moment for this group, it just kind of comes to the point of, was it a political stance that they've made in terms of let's not get into the messiness of what's currently going on in the climate, or is this a key time for the likes of big organizations with big followings to basically say, look, we're in support of we're in support of our LGBTQ plus community, and therefore we fully support them by doing this. It's interesting. I've seen a lot of arguments on both sides for that, and as you say, John, I think what will be interesting to come out of it will be, we obviously know that the GM meeting, the first initial GM meeting of the year, will take place just before the Stanley Cup playoffs, which is when the GMs from across the league will come together and discuss some topics about which they'll discuss some topics that will be the main key topics that they'll have a chat about once the Stanley Cup comes to an end, and they'll have the general GM meeting, which usually happens around about June time, and then we usually report on it over the off season. So it'll be interesting to see if this initiative, if the Pride initiative and Hockey is for Everyone, will be interesting to see if that is on the agenda for that chat, and if that what will come of that as of next season when we move through, to see is there just a stance where the NHL have decided, it's been, we started this in 2018, we're now, 5-6 years on, we kind of maybe need to refresh things and we look at things differently. I don't know. Be interesting to see where that moves to.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be massively interesting. And look, it wouldn't be the first time that sporting organisations have decided to stay apolitical. Given, and like you say, given everything, given the climate in North America in particular at the minute, and what's going on there, it would not be surprising to see them take a neutral stance and maybe sit back to see how things land over the next year or so, and whether they continue with this as a league-wide event, if you like. But regardless, it's sad to see it come to that.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of NHL and moves and changes in the NHL, while it hasn't been 100% confirmed by any specific source, there has been rumblings this past week, and it's really gathered steam coming off this past weekend from a tweet that was put up by an NHL official, in which Gary Bateman to this point. So we should lead on with the fact that we know at the moment currently in the NHL we have 32 teams. Most recent expansions were the Vegas Golden Knights and then obviously the Seattle Kraken coming in 2021, 2022. Gary Bateman had said that we're not in an expansion mode, that things will slow down and whatever else. But this past weekend, there was some indication to suggest that there was a possibility that a 33rd and a 34th franchise was possibly going to be potentially being announced over the course of the next maybe coming months, and this might be something that might pop its head up at this meeting, as we say, the GM meeting. The first stage, if you're going to have a franchise being added to the NHL, comes in the form of this GM meeting around June time, where a vote usually is put out to say if there's been a declaration for any teams that are interested in moving into the NHL, and applications usually are put out, and then teams will usually accept if an application can be put in from certain teams. And what's interesting is that the tweet that was put out by someone from the NHL or from NHL's network simply just said NHL to Houston was all it said, and that then led people to believe then what is this franchise and where is this coming from. However, there has been rumblings on Twitter this past week where there's two cities particularly have expressed interest, which is obviously Houston and Atlanta, but nothing official has happened or nothing official has came out just yet. So I suppose, John, the way to look at it is there's been a couple of teams. There's been 6 teams in general that have this over this last year. There's been a bit more talk, I suppose, a bit more, definitely a lot more grumblings and a lot more coming out from certain cities. But there's six cities in general that have been on everybody's lips. That is Atlanta, Houston, Kansas City, Portland, Maine, Quebec City, and then obviously another team coming out of Metro Toronto, which is kind of Hamilton direction. The Hamilton Bulldogs are probably the most common team there. I suppose the main thing is what I find interesting was obviously we've got 2 teams that were being mentioned here. We have obviously Houston, and we have Houston and we have Atlanta being the 2 main runners, 2 forerunners of what it's been looked at. We know in the past we've had NHL teams in both. We've had the Houston Oreos and Atlanta Thrashers. Atlanta obviously was
Atlanta's famous. Had 2 franchises.
Yeah.
Atlanta had the Flames, who are now in Calgary, and the Thrashers, who are now the Jets. Is that right?
Oh, the Jets
are the Coyotes. Franchise?
Yes, they are. Yep. The Jets.
Became the Jets.
2006.
How dare the NHL look at giving Atlanta a third opportunity before going back to Quebec, who should have been in pole position when the Vegas Golden Knights and definitely Seattle were considered and were brought in as expansions. Canada, at this point, deserves another franchise.
Agreed.
Before continental USA. I would sooner see a franchise started in Hawaii before I saw any of the failed franchise cities granted expansion again.
I mean, we are in very early days, very, very early days. Obviously, this is still just a kind of that rumor. It's kind of that murmur stage, kind of like but the fact that it's just caught so much traction over this last week, especially given the fact that the tweet went out and people are now starting to rumble about this, and it was kind of, I suppose it was kind of a low level discussion around whether or not it was going to expand more over the next year or so. But I mean, any there particularly that you kind of thought surprise names, any particular cities that you kind of thought be interesting?
I say interesting, but actually the more I think about it, it's not interesting in the slightest, is a second franchise for Toronto. I say it's surprising because obviously having two NHL franchises in a metropolitan area, in one single metropolitan area, is quite interesting. The one thing that would give me pause as to why it would be a good idea is because the Leafs as a fan base are completely oversubscribed and their ticket prices are enormous and insane. So actually, splitting that city down the middle and giving an opportunity for fans to go to potentially a cheaper arena to a new expansion franchise would be fantastic, especially for the likes of us tourists who love to go to effectively what feels like the home of hockey, probably outside of New York and maybe Montreal, would just be brilliant. The one that I quite like, and I know I just said Atlanta being given a third strike at it, but see that Thrashers jersey? That's still a nice jersey.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you bring that back, same way that I would love to see Quebec come back, because again the Nordiques had a cracking jersey. Absolutely loved the Quebec Nordiques logo, the royal blue jersey, really really nice. But yeah, I could quite happily see a second franchise in Toronto if it helps for nice cheap tickets to the NHL for tourists who want to go to Toronto.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, as I say, it is early murmurs, and it is a kind of early rumor at the moment. But we will stick with it, and we will come back to it if there's any more traction, if it does gain any more traction. But it'll be interesting to see, as we say, when it comes to that managers meeting, or the GM meeting, sorry, I should say, come June time, whether or not this will be on the table for discussion around that boardroom. So we will wait and see. The last story to leave on this period is we mentioned it obviously at the start of at the top of the show. We are at the tail end of the general season in the NHL, and obviously we know here in the Elite League the season is what we kind of work towards. We work towards that lifting that trophy at the end of the season, and that's a big trophy for us to lift because you do all that hard work and all that heavy lifting throughout the year to win that trophy, and for us that's the bigger one. We obviously know ourselves, and if you're not familiar with the NHL, the NHL doesn't really put as much onus and as much emphasis on the league itself as a run-in. The focus is always on the playoff and the playoff run in Lord Stanley's Cup, and so as part of that, obviously we have the trade deadline day, which is just past at the start of March there, and as part of that, we know that the teams are now working over the next 6 or 7 weeks to kind of build towards that playoff run. And we did see some movement and some movement shaken around the league this past week. This past trade deadline day, and I guess really just to kind of maybe just highlight some of those trades, because some of them were massive and some of them were, shall we say, significant in relation to what they've decided to go with, in relation to like how many teams decide to make moves. Right throughout. At one point, I was looking daily at the Leafs, and I just thought to myself, "Oh, another one. The Leafs obviously moving towards the kind of the build up of towards the end of the season, trying to kind of really strengthen the Leafs moving forward into that playoff spot. Obviously, one of the big names coming in, which took I think a lot of people by surprise, was Ryan O'Reilly. He's a massive. Okay, maybe he's past his peak in terms of his offense, but he is a utility player. Coming in, he obviously had an amazing playoff runoff with St. Louis in 2019. I think he's still, in peak form in terms of trying to get up those set plays, and I think it was a fantastic move for the Leafs. I think another big move that happened with the Leafs that took people by surprise was obviously that move between the Leafs and the Washington Capitals. We've seen a bit of a change there. We've seen surprisingly Rasmus Sandin moving to the Capitals, and we took in Eric Gustafsson, which I think the biggest thing that came out of it was, I think there was a video going around of Rasmus leaving the training ground, the training rink, and it was heartbreaking to say the least. It was just, they showed this video of just like him pretty much being escorted out, as if like security were escorting him from the building, trying to be like, no, you can't grab your stuff. You're moving now, you're going. And you had players who were basically just like hugging him, and just like it was devastating. It really was. But I think that the fact that they've made it the Toronto have made this move to kind of reinforce this moving into the final run in the playoffs is just, it's an interesting move for them. One of the other big interesting ones for me is obviously then we talked about them as well, the Boston Bruins. John, you mentioned at the start, they have dominated so far this season, but they have just strengthened more so. And I think the biggest one coming out of it was probably that signing of Taylor Bertuzzi, who's came into the Bruins. Yeah, I think that was a big one. What would you say? Would you agree?
Oh, look, that's a team. Like we talked about them earlier, they are absolutely stacked. There was chat of some potential injury worries heading into playoffs, but they have more than covered that. I mean, it's not just Bertuzzi. They then also then picked up was it Dmitry Orlov?
Yep.
And there was another guy,
Garnet Hathaway.
Yeah. So they are adding depth across that team, and we're a good few days after those trades. They didn't wait up to trade deadline for those, as far as I remember, and they're still rolling, which is just mental to see. I'm trying to remember. There was one trade that caught my mind, and it was a netminder. It was a netminder who got traded and then made it very public that he would not be playing for the team that he was traded to. And did they end up in Vegas?
It was oh my god, it's on the tip of my tongue and I can't even think now. It's a big name too. It was a big name.
Yeah.
Big name. Quick. Jonathan Quick. No.
Jonathan Quick. Yes, he has ended up in. He has ended up in Vegas. So he was traded by the Kings in. Much as you said, I mean, some trades are just done, and players don't know anything about it. He was traded, made it fairly clear that he was going to go absolutely nowhere near the team that he was traded to, and they offloaded him incredibly quickly over to the Vegas Golden Knights, where he had a hero's welcome. And if I remember right, he had a big win in his debut for the Golden Knights. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see Golden Knights doing this again. They had a fantastic run in their expansion year, bringing in Fleury, and an experienced, a veteran netminder, and now they're doing it again. They've managed to get in there through this situation with Jonathan Quick and bring him in, and he looks like he's having a decent time. Currently sitting for the season with a save percentage of .877, mm-hmm. Which is not maybe not fantastic, given the fact that he's 37 years old, has been a franchise name for the Kings, and this has been the problem, and I think this rubbed a lot of Kings fans up the wrong way as well, that this guy is franchise. He is, I mean, you think about the Kings and you think about Jonathan Quick, but the funny thing that I was seeing about it is fans were acting all surprised, and then people went, what are you surprised about? This is a franchise who does this. Like, this is a franchise who are particularly famous for having traded a particular player back in the late 80s. Late 80s, early 90s? A certain number 99. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. I mean, look, they have form with this. The ownership have history with this. So, look, it happens. But just the way that he went about it, I really hope Quick has a good end to this season. I hope he enjoys the hockey that he plays in Vegas for the rest of the season.
Sticking with that 99 kind of that 99 analogy that you were talking about, obviously that move, that trade back in the day, for Gretzky, that was a massive thing, and it changed everything in relation to American hockey in terms of that big trade where it came out of nowhere. People are saying that there was another trade that was made this past trade deadline day that came as a massive surprise, and some people are arguing that it was probably just as dramatic, maybe just as public, and maybe a massive moment in the history of American hockey for such a massive big name.
Is this somebody moving to New York? Is it by any chance?
Patrick Kane leaving Chicago and moving to the New York Rangers.
Yeah. That I first saw that being talked about on social media, I think maybe a day before it was confirmed. And I was like, that's nonsense. Why would Patrick Kane be leaving? And then it was confirmed, and it's insane. It's massive. I wonder if it is was Kane too big for his boots? There's been chat about that he was demanding of that franchise. He knew his worth, but he does have legacy in Chicago with the Blackhawks, but he has a massive opportunity. The Rangers, where are the Rangers sitting at the minute? Are they?
They're sitting
are
third.
They're
Sitting third.
They're in a fight, and
Yep.
having firepower like Patrick Kane coming into their organisation, that's big. That's a big bold move.
It must clear some gap though. It must clear some it
Must clear
some
huge
massive in the
huge
wage.
cap space.
Must do.
Be huge cap
Must
space
do.
clear for them.
Must do. The last one, just the one touch on just before we move on, John. And this is coming to your own, kind of technically to your own Predators. There was, although maybe it wasn't as a massive heading move in relation to like the likes of Patrick Kane and that type of announcements that were made and the kind of took the world by storm. But there was a trade made between the Preds and the Lightning as part of the trade deadline, and it was probably the boldest trade I think I have seen in a long while. Would you agree?
Yeah. So this is the trade for Tanner Jeannot, who went to the Lightning from the Preds for Cal Foote, who are it's a really interesting one. Tanner Jeannot is a 5th round draft pick, while Cal Foote is a 2025 first round pick, top 10 protected pick as well. Really, really interesting. I was shocked, and I was equally not shocked. I mean, as I said at the top of the podcast, the Preds are in a soft rebuild. We're clearing space. We are moving on some names. We even there was talk of trading away our captain as well with Yossi. I think the Preds are going to be changing heavily over the next 2 or 3 seasons. I think there's going to be a massive change in that franchise and how that franchise looks. It's going to be built around Juuse Saros, our netminder, who is building up to being a really good replacement for Pecorine, who, interestingly, we will be unveiling a statue of fairly soon. I think it's actually... Is it this month? It might be this month, actually. The Preds are unveiling a statue outside the Bridgestone Arena of Pecorine. But yeah, we will be building a new team, I expect, around Juuse Saros, and there will be I'd like to see a young team, and bringing in Cal Foote as a defenseman. I'm
yeah, and then
I'm reasonably happy about that.
Having those 4 options then of like 2025 first round pick, 2024 second round pick, and then this 2023 you have 2 picks, a second round pick and a third round pick. I mean, I feel like you took loads from it, but anyway.
But that's it. We're buying options. We're in the market for options. Is the biggest thing, and that's exactly what the Preds are doing.
I think it was a very significant trade day or trade week, shall we say, or trade deadline day anyway. It was very interesting to see all the things that moving and shaking. I think it was one of the most interesting ones in a long while anyway, and that's just my opinion, but maybe others think differently.
This was the it wasn't Yossi at all. We did actually do another big trade, which was Mattias Ekholm. He went to Edmonton.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, let us know what you think. What was your surprise for the playoffs, or what was your surprise for the trade deadline? Let us know what your thoughts are on that one. John, with that takes us to the end of the stories for this period, and that takes us into our third period.
Welcome to Period 3. Period 3 is where we look at anything and everything else in the world of hockey, and we call it Knocky News. Marty, I hate to sound like 2 of our other co-hosts when they sometimes come here, but unfortunately you have done all of the work for what is normally the period that I take control of. I am going to clearly go with one of your two stories first, and I'm going to go with your street hockey, your access to the game being made easier by the NHL.
Yeah, I'm gonna thank the hockey news because they made it kind of easy for me this week when it came to this period of hockey. There's two news stories that were dominating that I seen on social media that I followed through on the hockey news then, and the two main stories are the first one was around this development of the NHL creating an accessible format for growing hockey across the whole of the US, and that is in the form of the NHL Street, which is a new ball hockey tournament or ball hockey franchise kind of sport that they're going to bring right across different communities across North America. This coming summer, during the off season of the NHL is going to be launching the NHL Street, which is going to kind of spread the love of hockey through what they're calling low barrier inclusive programs. The NHL have come out themselves and they have said that there is a real fear around the fact that they're fully acknowledging the fact that hockey is an expensive sport to get into, that those restrictions should be removed in some form to create the ability to kind of have newcomers come into the sport and enjoying the game as best as possible. And the best way of doing that, they've decided, is through this kind of program, this kind of idea of bringing the sport out to the communities and creating a kind of almost like a ball hockey tournament style type program. The franchise, it will see 16 basically what the plan is to have the street hockey tournament or the street hockey program going right across different parts of the US this coming summer. And they have put out a press release to say that the first cities that will see the program launching this coming summer are Boston, Edmonton, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Austin, and Texas. Or Austin in Texas, I should say, not and Texas. Austin, Texas. I mean, some of those others, here there's obviously locations that they have talked about, which is like New Mexico, which is one that they're looking to kind of future targets, and that's kind of one of those kind of areas. And I guess some of these names and some of these cities aren't surprising because obviously they have NHL teams in a number of these cities. Obviously, the majority of them. But obviously they're trying to build the sport in and around kind of that Austin and Texas area. You know, they're kind of trying to build it more around that kind of.
Is that not a bit weird as a concept? Like they're talking about the barriers to hockey and they talk about like access to ice and all of that, but they're launching it in cities with established NHL franchises, especially places like Winnipeg, Vancouver. And Edmonton, like you're taking it to the heartland of seasonal pond hockey, to cities who have established hockey infrastructure. I can totally accept going to places like New Mexico or to Austin, even to places like Detroit. Maybe I would say that there's probably a social deprivation issue there with cost associated with getting into hockey. But when you're taking something like ball hockey, why not go into the states and the provinces where you don't have ice, where like you're concentrating this on people who maybe don't have access to that and maybe actually know nothing about hockey.
Yeah. And that's a fair question. I kind of that was what led me to believe one of the questions I was going to ask about this story was that it's, I suppose, just to continue with a bit before I come back to that question for you, John. But one of the big things that they've tried to say about this whole idea of the NHL Street is that the idea behind it is to create a fun environment that isn't about building, particularly like trying to look for the next Connor McDavid or the next Austin Matthews. It's not about that skill development. The priority for this program is to have kids walk away from it thinking, that was amazing, want to do it again, and maybe wanting then to enter into traditional hockey programs. So starting to learn to skate, starting to kind of enjoy the idea of hockey as an actual sport through different means. And I guess, as you say, though, it is a bit surprising that they've decided to target those cities that kind of maybe have traditional teams already going. And as you say, you know, developing it more in a point, why haven't they decided to point out, or, you know, I suppose find out, maybe, well, I suppose it's early days. It's the first time they're going to be trying it, so maybe there's kind of a almost like we don't want to feel in the first time we're doing it. We want to make sure it works, and we want to make sure it's creative, fun, and we want to see what we're doing the right thing. We want to see if it does actually push youth into traditional variations of the sport. in the end of the day. And I suppose that's why maybe they've decided to kind of stick to some of those areas where they know that there's a potential to kind of maybe move into that point. But
Yeah,
as you
look,
say,
I also accept that they do say in the press release that there will be real intent, a real intentional pursuit by us to go places we haven't been before, and a huge component of the NHL street is getting outside of club boundaries. So yeah, maybe you're 100% right. Maybe I've read too quickly into that they're staying within their franchise areas, and look, maybe it'll come. It'll come.
The other thing we talk about here is, some of these cities and some of these areas that we're talking about, like when we think about those cities that are being mentioned, you mentioned it yourself there as well. Like you're talking about Detroit, we know that there's kind of maybe high deprivation in Detroit, in terms of like certain areas of Detroit. But the same again, even in Pittsburgh, we probably know that there's probably suburbs of Pittsburgh who maybe don't really attend the games, don't really get into hockey because
look,
one reason or another.
Any of these big metropolitan cities, there's elements of social and economic deprivation, especially now in this day and age. With we talked about it. Like there's currently an energy crisis going on pretty much across the entire world. The cost of living is incredibly high. So when you talk about people potentially tossing up supporting a child through a potential hockey career, which is not cheap, or keeping a home warm and keeping kids fed, then you know which one's going to win out. So programs like this can do nothing but get kids and keep kids enthusiastic in the sport, and hopefully find different access routes for them into the game of ice hockey, or even just keep them into hockey through ball hockey.
True. Yep. I'm going to move on to my last story.
Go for it.
Before I move on. So the last story, and it's just I don't mean to sound like it's a quick one, but just one I just wanted to highlight because I thought it was quite interesting. This past, about a week and a half ago now, because obviously it should have been in last week's podcast, and obviously we didn't do one last week, and I had the intention of including this last week. It was a story hit the headlines in Sweden, where one of the women's hockey teams in Sweden, as part of the women's hockey division in the SDHL, decided to play one of their games with a very innovative concept of using invisible glass helmets. So there were helmets that were made of clear plastic, and the idea of it, Warren, was trying to highlight the fact that the Swedish women are trying to break through that glass barrier, that glass ceiling, in that they're trying to create a more awareness around that women's sport and women's professional sport, and women in general within the workplace. There's still restrictions, and they kind of want to highlight the fact that that there should be an equal footing for women, especially within sport of ice hockey, and they wore these specially designed glass helmets to kind of put forward their protest, if you will. There is a massive, I suppose, inequality when it comes to funding and facilities, particularly in hockey in Sweden. And one of the big things that they wanted to address was the systematic barrier to women, and how they're facing this barrier. So one of the big ideas was, if they kind of built around this program around breaking the glass ceiling, they came up with this initiative, this idea then to kind of have these glass helmets that would kind of represent breaking the glass ceiling. That's why I put it up, because I just thought they were very innovative. I thought it was a very interesting story, and the visual alone I thought was quite interesting. And there's another image, I think it's on their Twitter account maybe, so if you want to go and take a look at their Twitter account, there's actually a image and videos of the actual skating around as well with the helmets on, and it was quite a visual. As a visual concept, it definitely stole your attention. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
No, it's definitely worth mentioning, and would be remiss without mentioning as well that yesterday was International Women's Day as well. So it's well timed as well. Even here at Door 14, we are nothing without the strong women around us. So we thank them for the time and effort that they put in with us, absolute idiots, while we sit here and talk about hockey.
Mm-hmm. Yep, agreed.
Marty, that is pretty much it. That is the end of Knocky News. There is nothing else there because I have been incredibly lazy and haven't added anything in there myself. So I'm going to throw it back over to you because we are into overtime.
Yeah, our overtime. We do have two questions in our overtime segment. Our overtime segment is just anything else that kind of has that catches our attention, or has happened in the most recently has been where we're taking our questions that we get from you guys on social media, and we kind of go around. Usually, if there's more of us, but there's me and John will answer the questions for you anyway. And some questions are pitted to us. Two main questions that have been put our direction from a number of different people, but also just generally as discussion points that we've been going about on social media this past week and a half, which people have wanted to kind of know, John, maybe what our take is on some of these bits and pieces. I'm going to go with the first one, and the first one is an interesting one in that it was a question that came up around the transferring of bans across leagues. This came in the form of, I suppose it came because we have a number of players who are now playing in the Elite League, who are playing on two-way contracts, who are both playing in the NIHL, as well as as being as supplementary players for the Elite League team, for various different Elite League teams. And one of the ones that came up, and particularly why it was put our direction, is obviously because as Belfast Giants fans, we're lucky enough to have Sean Norris, who plays for the Belfast Giants, who also plays for the Milton Keynes Lightning. However, at the start of March, on Friday the 3rd of March, Sean Norris received a match penalty for checking from behind in a game against the Raiders at the end of February, but was assessed a tier 1 penalty, which means that he will receive a 6-game suspension and what they call penalty points as well, which is added on, and obviously as penalty points build up, it means more suspensions. What was interesting then is the fact that the player who then is playing in the NIHL has a 6-game suspension, which is quite a high number of suspensions. When you think about, we talk about, one of the things we've always talked about is the NIHL. We've always talked about the fact that like their disciplinary code in terms of suspensions and follow up and everything else has been quite interesting in terms of how they do it. In terms of they have these tiers, they have penalty points, they have a bit higher, the I suppose the maybe match bans that they take are slightly maybe higher than what we usually expect here in the Elite League for certain hits, and rightly or wrongly, maybe it's maybe keeping players safer than what maybe happens here in the Elite League. I don't know, you can have that argument yourselves. But what was interesting was then that means that Sean Norris, who plays for the Belfast Giants whenever he's free, means that he has to serve those 6 games, that 6-game suspension in the NIHL, and he has to serve 6-game suspension before he can come in and play for the Belfast Giants again. I suppose people are wanting to know, John, what's your take on that? I mean, it's across. You could argue, because obviously if it was IHF, or whatever it is, you would argue that a suspension anywhere means it's suspension right across. It has to be served. But when you take leagues, when you're taking a look at two different leagues when you have two different leagues, you have such different disciplinary codes, and
it doesn't really, it doesn't work that way. I can accept that that Norris has to take this ban because the Elite League effectively transposes in 99.9% the IHF rulebook into its casebook, I think is what they call their rulebook, the EIHL casebook. And it states, and that came out, there was someone, I think, took a screenshot of the section in the casebook that says this, that a player who is banned in one league can still can leave that league and sign for another team, but if they are subsequently or are serving a ban in that league, they must see it out in the team that they're currently signed for. We saw, this isn't the first time that this has been discussed either. There was the whole chat about I think Matt Nickerson, the fact that he left Milton Keynes before he had finished serving a ban that he'd been given for an altercation with a fan.
The difference with that was, though, that was at the argument there with the Nickerson one was that he was at an Elite League level, IHF Elite League level, and therefore had to serve that ban within this league before he could move on.
Had to serve the ban, and that's
if
fine,
he wanted to play. If he wanted to play here, but he could move. He could move on to somewhere else.
If he went to another IHF jurisdiction league and team, he would have had to serve that ban.
Right.
So let's say it's not the first time that this has been discussed, and it's not a massive deal. In all respects, it would have been nice to see Sean play in the Challenge Cup final. All things being considered, we are still juggling players around. With, I think, are we still carrying 1 or 2 extra imports at this point? I know we're going to talk about imports in a second as well. But yeah, I'm fine with it, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect his training with the team. It would be nice for him to get a few more games under his belt with us as we come into playoffs. But we still sit to look and see kind of what his impact will be with the Giants.
That's, I mean, to be fair, that's my thoughts exactly. I kind of see where people are coming from, and the fact that, like, you know, where they're saying, like, you know, it does seem a bit harsh because obviously the tier levels are so different compared to, you know, with league from one league to the other. And I agree, I completely see where they're coming from. But as you say, John, you know, it's disheartening that we can't have Norris as a backup utility player if we need him there. It's not the end of the day. It's not, you know, we're still running
it's
lines.
Not the end of
okay?
his season.
It's not.
Let's be honest. It's not the end of his season.
No.
He has been, Adam Keefe and the rest of the coaching team have brought him in for a reason.
And he's impressed.
The reality has to be that he must have known. He played this game in the NIHL. He knew that this was coming. He won't be the only one who knew that this was coming. Adam Keefe and the coaching team for the Giants will have known that something was coming. And the fact that there was some kind of suspension was likely to come. He took a match penalty in the NIHL. We know that the NIHL take match penalties and game penalties very seriously. They have their penalty point scoring system when it comes to their bans. It won't have been too difficult to really have a rough idea of what the expectation for a ban was. Bear in mind that the NIHL have taken their time to come to this, and Sean has played, I'm looking at the stats here, Sean has played 8 games for the Belfast Giants, sitting with 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points total in those 8 games. Nowhere near the sort of numbers that he's putting up, or was putting up in the NIHL. I mean, sitting with 43 games played, 27 goals and 49 assists for 76 points. So nearly 2 points per game production is what he's putting up in the NHL. But he, yeah, like you say, he's coming in here as a utility player. He's coming in here as a utility forward. So it'll be good to see what he does. But this was not an ill-considered signing by any point or any case and form.
And I think I definitely think he's impressed this season so far for the Belfast Giants, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's maybe more of Norris next year for the Belfast Giants. That's all I'm saying.
I expect so. You say that he is well, he's a dual national. He's an English Czech dual national. So obviously he has the Brit selection when it comes to the Elite League. But
naturally, that brings us to the other question then, John, which is perfect. The other question then is other big rumor that has gone around from this past weekend. I don't know where it started. I don't know how it started, but there is quite a strong rumor that seems to be kind of gaining again. One of those rumors that seems to be gaining legs that maybe would lead to us believe that maybe there's some truth behind this, that maybe this is something that is possibly coming. So there is chat that the import limit in the Elite League next year is going to raise from 14 to 15. It's caused, shall we say, some controversy and some heated arguments on social media. I think I'm right in saying that. And I think the question has been put out by a few people who have sent in this question is, what's our take on this? I think one question was, let me get one of them up, I'll show you it. But I suppose the main question is, and the main argument has been, by increasing the import limit to 15, does that mean that the chances then that local Brits have of joining the Elite League then decreases? And is that a significant impact for the development of Brit hockey?
Look, if you're talking about roster sizes staying exactly the same, most teams playing with 3.5 lines, and you're going to increase the import limit by 1, so you're going to go from 14 to 15, you are immediately putting 10 Brits out of contention for spots in the Elite League in regular playing situations. This then again brings up the conversation about British development and the current state of the GB programme. and how that is impacted going forward. For a start, let's be totally clear about where we've been asked this question. This has come from Anthony at Banners.
Is that the only one? I've had two other exact same question from two others. Exactly same.
So name them. Say who it is. We've given Anthony a shout out. Let's give the others a shout out.
I'll need to go find them. I know one of them was Mark anyway. I'll go find out who the other one is. You keep talking.
You find out who the other one is, and I'll start chatting. So, yes, it brings up the conversation about the Elite League and its role in development. And I had a certain perspective on this whenever this rumour first came out, and we chatted about this in our group chat, and I basically just started saying Super League, Super League, Super League. I'm going to be totally honest, I've thought about it a little bit more, and I've looked at some of the viewpoints online, and it's probably one of the few times I'm going to say that I disagree with the argument of the Elite League being development league. We are a small hockey community here in the UK, let's be totally honest. We are a second string sport at best, let's be totally honest. We're not one of the most trafficked sports, but we're getting there, but we're not one of the most trafficked sports. The Elite League exists as the pinnacle of the sport. We are there for... It is there for entertainment value, and it's there to make money. It's a business, it's a going concern. The way that business gets better is to put the best potential product forward. It does that currently by bringing in non-GB players from across the world. The game is changing as well. We've seen the Elite League go from a highly physical North American game to a fast, high-skill European game as well. Let's just call it what it is. That is what the Elite League is becoming. Our inclusion in competitions like the Continental Cup and the Champions Hockey League is forcing that change, and it's league-wide in general. We still have one or two of the rink teams who know exactly what their clientele is in the stands, and they still want physical hockey. We see that with the style of play that we see from Manchester, from Fife, and from a couple others. But I would suggest that it is not the Elite League's role and remit to develop British talent. What's missing is a unified body. It would be the purpose of a unified GB UK hockey body to make sure that GB development is prioritised in the lower leagues. We are starting to see certain elements of that come through even with the Elite League, because we're starting to see more and more two-way deals coming about with NIHL teams and Elite League teams. So while the Elite League is not taking a personal hand in the development of British players, they are making inroads with their product because they see the need for things like injury cover, potentially for their own Brits who they're signing full-time, with the capacity to bring in younger, fresh bodies from the NIHL who prove themselves in that league and can come and take that big step up to play against 14 or 15 imports for 20, 30 minutes a game. So I'll probably get it in the neck from Anthony when he listens to this, but I don't agree with you on this one, Anthony. I am here for the product that the Elite League gives, and if development is what people want, then that's what the NIHL and the SHL, that's what they exist for, is my stance at it at the minute. I am open to that changing, but that's where I see things currently.
I've got nothing else to add. I think you've hit it in the head. I know there's two camps. There's the argument of quality on the quality product and paying the money to see a quality product and the most entertainment value and looking at the best players. And there's the argument of the development side. And you're right. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's not technically a development league, but we want to make sure we give the opportunities to the players who've reached that level to come in and play. And one of the big things I did read, and which is an interesting article, and it's maybe be a topic for another time. But one of the big things I did see, and a lot of people were talking about, and I don't know who it was I read made this statement, but as someone clearly pointed out, we're heading to a point in the Elite League now where a lot of the Brits that we all know, household names that we know, are all on that brink, or all on that level of almost near retirement stages, or starting to think about the careers after hockey.
Well,
I know it sounds.
Look at the last 2 seasons. Two big names. Colin Shields went at the end of last season, and at the end of this season, we already know that we're losing Jonathan Phillips from the Steelers.
And those names are going to start to kind of drop off more and more. And yeah,
Craig Peacock stopped playing hockey like 3 seasons ago.
Anyway, lost my train of thought now.
Sorry.
Yeah, again, so I guess the question will be, obviously then how do we replace those players if we're not developing? But as you say, it's not. I don't think it is the league's place to develop them. I think the development happens at grassroots. It happens at that ground level, and then we move in. And as you say, those two-way deals, we start looking at those two-way deals, and we see more of those happening, and that's how you develop that link in with having players coming in.
And look, it's up to the players as well. I know as fans we can have an opinion. But let's be honest, it's just an opinion. We're not going to change the way that the Elite League and the NHL get on together. We're just not going to be able to put any sort of pressure on owners in the Elite League, or the NHL is not going to be ever in a position to put enough or any pressure on the Elite League to say that you have to be part of development of British players. What it is it puts it at the doorstep of the players individually. If they want to take the step up to the Elite League, if they want to be professionals, then they have to put the time and effort into their own development. They have to progress through. We're starting to see it. Max Stewart, Kel Beattie, Sean Norris.
Yep.
These players are putting the time and effort in. Now, you could say, for example, with Max Stewart, there could be an element of nepotism within there. Obviously, Rob is an assistant coach in the Belfast Giants, but he's gone away and proved himself elsewhere. Mm-hmm. He's gone and played in the SHL, in the NIHL. Kel Beattie has done exactly the same. A number of others who've gone through the Junior Giants program, who've then gone over and played in the lower leagues, have come back to the Giants having proven themselves elsewhere. They might have had a good step up or a good leg up, having the opportunity to train with the likes of whatever Belfast Giants roster was there when they had that opportunity. But that's on those players. That's on them to show the skill, the commitment and the development to then throw on the teal jersey after that. So it's at the foot of the players. If you want to play in one of the 10 Elite League teams in one of the limited Brit spots, if we go up to, well, even now there's still limited spots, but the more limited spots, if we move up to 15 imports, then it's on you. I'm never going to do it. I haven't got the skill to do it. I'm never going to be able to play with that. Christ, I can't even skate backwards. But if these guys want to do that, go prove yourself and then put yourself in the marketplace and say, I'm ready. And then see where you go from there.
I think
Come
that's
up into the entertainment league, which is the EIHL, which is the grandstand product, if you like.
And I think that is perfect, and that leaves that I think that answers that question quite fairly. And John, sorry, before we finish the podcast, before we move on to the last part, that game in Cardiff is finished. Cardiff.
Oh no, you're not allowed to do that! I wasn't even paying attention. Right, go on, you're going to have to tell me. The
Manchester Storm have won 2-1 in Cardiff.
Look at these mid-table teams doing us favours every night of the
week. With that, we are going to sign off for this week. You can catch up as you always on this episode and previous episodes at our website at door14hockey.com. Get involved. Send us your questions, your comments, your whatever you want to do. Kind of reach out to us on social media, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at door14hockey. And also don't forget to like, share, subscribe and leave us comments, star ratings, whatever it is on your podcast provider of choice. With that, we will sign off for this week. I'm Marty.
I'm John.
Have a great week.